Hello and welcome back. In this video we're going to complete the school store project by filling out the balance sheet. And what the balance sheet is just using these other sheets, or the inventory and sales sheet in particular, to kind of get an overall idea of how the store is doing. Okay, to start with, we want to go to the sales sheet and to copy out these. Control C, copy out the same information we used in the inventory sheet and the sales sheet. I'm going to come to cell A1 and paste that in there. I can open it up a little bit. I can worry about fine-tuning the formatting later. My next step would be to add my labels across the top. Again, I've copied them so I could paste them quickly. Total sold, total cost, gross income, net profit, and tax collected will be my fields. I'll go back to my sales sheet, click anywhere up here in these labels up on the top, copy the format, select my fields so that they're formatted, and I'll worry about the widths later. Now you might say, well, couldn't you have gone to your inventory sheet and gotten that format? And the answer would be yes, because you copied the format from sales and applied it to inventory. It's just, as a general habit, it is always better to go back to the source. And the reason is, I didn't do it here, but it's always possible that I copied that formatting in here and then I made some kind of adjustment. Maybe I changed the font or I did something. And so they're not consistent between here and here. And when I select something from the item that was already a product of the first one, and I copy that, so I'm copying over that difference, and then I could add an additional difference to that, so the thing can start to get further and further from consistent. Now that might seem really picayune and petty, but I'm telling you, when you're doing these things, you're always better off going back to the same place or the same source for your information or for your formatting, etc. It's just a good practice that will help reduce errors. Okay, so now that I've got that, what I want to do is I want to come down here, because of the way this is visually. I'll come to column H and I will click in actually cell 2 there. So H2 equals, and what I need here is I want that tax rate information. Now it's true that I already put it somewhere else. I put it on the inventory sheet, but it makes sense for me to see it here. And with the same theory that I just used for going back to the source, for my formatting, I'm going to go back to inventory and simply select that cell. This ensures me consistency as well. And if I grab the box and drag it to the right, you'll see it's going to bring across the tax number. Or the tax amount. So if I come back to inventory and I change this and I say, my goodness, taxes went down to 6%, okay, it's displayed here. It's used in these calculations, but when I come to my balance sheet, it's also displayed here and saves me a smidgen of time, but really ensures that I don't make mistakes. Okay, so this is not our current tax rate. Not that it really matters. You could pretend this is another state or that the tax rate's changed, etc., and that would be fine. But note that it does adjust here. Now, as far as formatting, this formatting is really the same as this. I could, following my practice, I would come back here and grab the formatting, put it here, and this is simply a border, but if I wanted to be consistent, I could have come back here and grab that. I'm going to undo that for a second, not to make this any longer than it is, but let's just undo those two things. Just to illustrate, I could have selected both of these simultaneously, hit the formatter, and then when I click on that first cell, it applies it 2 cells to the right, so all my formatting is done at once. The last thing I have to do here is, and I can do this now or I can do it at the end, is select the body of the data, the area that we're going to populate, make sure that gets some borders. And again, I could have copied that from the back. As a matter of fact, let me show you a little trick. I'm going to click on a blank cell with no formatting, take the formatting tool, and select over everything. So I've stripped out my formatting. If I had some complex formatting on this side, I could select that, but I've got to get the same, my columns are different here, so I've really got to say 1, 2, I'm only really going up to F. The rest of it is the same, so wow, there's a lot less here. Pick that formatting, and following the same logic I used before, click in there, all the formatting will come up. Even if I'd done some formatting to these cells, that would be carried across. So let me select these two and bring that formatting forward to this sheet. Oh, I believe I forgot to click my formatter there, format painter. And there we go. Okay, so just something to think about as you're working, because when you're working with spreadsheets, learning some of these tricks to be quicker can save you just a ton of time. Now, let's look at our formulas for this sheet. We're looking at total sold. Total sold is simply a reference back to the sales sheet. Okay? And why have it in two places? Because it makes sense to see it here. And it also makes sense to see it here. Uh-oh. Now look what happened. Because of the way I copied my formatting, this is coming up as dollars. So that one I want to convert back, copy down, and everything is now correct. My total cost is simply a product of how many I sold times how much each one cost me. Now in this particular case, because this is a direct reference back, it's always going to be the same, and I'm going to feel comfortable using this as opposed to going back to the sales sheet. It's going to make it a little simpler. Times my cost per item, and there's the total cost. If you were to say, could you have taken your total from here, and then the cost per item from here, you'd be absolutely correct. You could have referred back to both of these sheets instead of taking it from here. The only reason I feel comfortable doing that is because this particular formula directly references the sales number here. So it says if I'm getting it from here. There's really no way I can think of where that can introduce an error, and it's a little more convenient, a little less confusing for me to point at this. Okay, so I'm going to do it again for gross income. I'm going to take the total sold. This time, instead of looking at my cost per item, I should look at my selling price per item. And for my net profit, it's the difference between the two. So it's going to be how much I brought in from the sales of binders minus how much the acquisition of those binders cost me. Oh my goodness, 693. Oh, it's because my formatting came across. Maybe it would be more efficient for me to have formatted this in two sections, but be that the case, it's a pretty quick conversion to get back to where I need to be, just changing it up here to currency. Tax collected is going to equal the number sold times the tax per item. And as we discussed previously, we've introduced some error into this field because that's not how we tax things. I don't add up the tax on each of the binders I sell you and each of the pencils if I sell them to you at once. I do a total first, I tax the total of that order, and then that may differ slightly from the way this is being calculated. For these types of numbers, it may amount to a couple of cents per item. In larger orders where you're talking about ordering thousands of things, obviously it might compound into dollars. It's not a big amount, but the point here is that it's an excellent opportunity to discuss with students the way you perform calculations and how they can bias your results, or how the different methods you approach what seems like a simple thing may impact the outcome. Okay, I'm going to select that entire row in this case and drag it down, so I'm just using a different method than I've used in the past. And on this sheet it really makes sense to get some totals. What were the total number of items I sold? What was my total cost? So down at the bottom I'm going to add another title or another label, total. And then I can use simply the sum. So I can get it from here. I can start to type it, any method. I'm using a couple of different methods so that you can see and pick the one you prefer. And I want to select everything from the second cell down to the, in my case, the one in cell B13, because that's the last item. Okay, so I sold 449 items. Now, I don't have to sum them all, because if I drag them across, the formula is going to increment. So now it's dealing with column C, and now it's dealing with column D, etc. And you can see, wow, that I made a profit in my store so far this year of $223. I'm going to put the borders on there. I am going to color code these. This is my only, this is not my only calculated field actually. I have a lot of calculated fields here, but this should stand out. This shouldn't get lost in this block of data. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a background color on it. And I'm going to take total over here. I'm going to give that its own separate background color. This might be a little close to the others. Let's make it stand out a little bit. Let's make that a light green. And we'll make this brighter green. Okay, I don't know if I like the colors, but you get the idea. You get the idea that this row of information is really different than all of this. Okay, because it's giving me totals. Okay, that's about it for this lesson. As I said, the only thing I would discuss if I was doing this with high school students, if I was doing this with business students, I would have them develop maybe a more complex system. Maybe they're actually running a school store, creating a school store, or creating a model for one. And probably these 4 tabs might not be sufficient. You'd probably be looking at creating an actual record of sales and things like that. But for students who are more sophisticated with math and calculations, that would be fine. For younger students, or middle grade students, I think this is a challenge, but a good one to take. And then if you want to do something like this with younger students, you might simplify it as well. Let me just come in here from cells B through F, narrow them down a little bit because they don't need to be quite so wide. Do the little bit of tweaking to finish it up and make it professional. And that's it. This is a model for tracking the finances of a school store.